a difficulty with liberal feminism is its universalism and its failure to grasp the fact that there are different life stages to being a woman in a way that there aren't so much to being a man. Which are connected to where your relationships and your reproductive work, if you like. It's an ancient archetype. This is not something I made up, but in the ancient archetype is the maiden, the mother, and the crone, or the matriarch, if you like, maiden, mother, and matriarch. If you want that to sound a bit less derogatory, because crone is people think of as derogatory, even though it absolutely shouldn't be. But if you're female, you have really quite different priorities and really quite different capacities at those different points in your life. If you're a maiden, there are working patterns you can adopt that make very little sense if you're a mother, or are extremely difficult or involve a lot of painful compromise if you're a mother. And again, once you move out of that stage into matriarch, assuming you have children, perhaps you're a grandmother at that point as well. You enter a new stage of life again. Where you hopefully have relationships with your extended family. You're perhaps helping with grandchildren or not, or just watching them grow up. And and I know a lot of older women who've reached that point and started a whole new career. In fact, I can think of tons of women in my life who've changed career 3 times over the course of maiden, mother, and matriarch. But this is not normalized because liberal feminism centers the maiden and treats the mother as a problem to be solved, and just ignores the matriarch altogether, or cancels her for being a TERF. And yet, but so this, just to loop this back around to the question of aesthetics and the question of centering. Because I don't know that we even should center the mother, but what I do think we could usefully do is think more concretely about the aesthetics of those different life stages, rather than treating women who age out of the maiden stage as being in some sense failures. There are plenty of ways to be beautiful and full of life and full of strength as a mother. I'm sure everybody here can think of mothers who are just amazing, even if they're not as tight as they were. And likewise, there's no reason why you shouldn't age into matriarch and be in your power and absolutely beautiful, and just an extraordinary, amazing person. But the aesthetics in an aesthetic sense, when it comes to women, we've become extraordinarily stunted. So I was, sort of half seriously talking with my friends about, there are, the online meme of, Giga Chad, wondering what the female equivalent is. What does a mother Giga Chad look like? What does a Giga Chad look like? What does a Giga Chad matriarch look like? We don't know. I mean, we know what a super hot maiden looks like, but we don't know what this kind of female Giga Chad version of a mother or a matriarch looks like, because nobody ever shows us those. Nobody ever represents that, because we just don't see it, because all the only lens that we're looking at womanhood through is the autonomous subject, rather than the much more relational and time and space oriented one, which I feel is more appropriate for thinking relationally about women.
Yeah, I mean, there's the whole idea of this women going through this process of life where there's these developmental stages. I think the one thing of which the focusing of the maiden, if you don't jump at some point to preparing for motherhood, is that there's a whole set of skills and a sense of being and a whole kind of process of coming into motherhood that if you're not thinking ahead, you may find yourself in this position where it's too late, and so there's almost this way that in a woman's life, there's so much benefit to kind of just being a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of what you're going into and how to gracefully move through these stages. And I totally agree that there's very little kind of general understanding of how that is. But this is so strange to me, because I don't feel like that this is the way it's always been. It's this strange forgetting. What is this amnesia? Where does this amnesia come from? I mean, would you say that you could lay the blame at the feet of the kind of advertising campaign of liberal feminism? Or do you think that there's something else, maybe even in the logic of the age of the machine, that actually can aggravate or accentuate or really draw out the maiden without really considering these other aspects of female life.
Well, it's certainly the maiden as an archetype is much more easily digestible, in the sort of frictionless memeplex. She photographs well. When you're on camera at 42, you look 42, and you just have to get used to it. When you're young flesh looks lovely. And likewise, the single woman buys stuff. The single woman consumes. She goes on holidays. She's the Sex and the City woman, right? Who's first and foremost defined by consumption and by short-term sexual encounters, by new handbags, by shoes, whatever, by her career. She's more economically productive. She never ducks out of the workforce to go and care for children or she certainly never wants to do those things, and if she does, she'll complain about it. And the idea of somebody who might actually want to duck out of the workforce is just inconceivable within that framework. So yeah, I think there's I think it's less that liberal feminism has done a number on women as that the machine has warped what is in fact a much richer and more nuanced set of debates around the role and politics of being a woman. Because there are countless other feminisms. It's not as though this sort of dominant, very kind of rabidly individualistic liberal feminism that we see pumped out at us from the pages of Vogue or Cosmopolitan or whatever is the only one. Time and again, pretty much since the dawn of the industrial era, feminists have argued for motherhood, and time and again they've been defeated. It comes back again and again and again. It's there in some of the counter arguments to Mary Wollstonecraft. It's there at the beginning of the 20th century. It popped up again in the 1960s and 1970s, and here I am doing it again, and I'll probably lose.